I've been a dispatcher for over 2 decades, and I thought I'd heard it all. Domestic disputes, bar fights, stolen cars, you name it. But the call I received on a chilly October night in 2014 still haunts me to this day. It started like any other shift, but it ended with me questioning everything I believed about reality. It was around 11:45 p.m., and the night had been quiet. Too quiet, as they say. I was sipping my 3rd cup of coffee, half listening to the hum of the police radio, when the phone rang. The voice on the other end was frantic but controlled, the kind of tone people use when they're trying to keep it together but are moments away from breaking. 911, what's your emergency? I asked, pen poised over my notepad. It's my wife, the man said, his voice trembling. She's been talking on the phone for hours. But she's alone. No one's called. My pen hesitated. It wasn't the strangest thing I'd ever heard, but the way he said it sent a chill down my spine. Sir, can you tell me your name and address? He gave me the information. Greg Wilkins, 287 Maple Street. It was a small, quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of town, mostly retirees and young families. Not the kind of place you expect trouble. Can you put her on the line? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. There was a pause, and then he whispered. She won't stop repeating the same thing. Over and over. She just keeps saying, he's coming. My stomach tightened. Okay, Greg. Can you tell me if your wife has a history of mental health issues or if she's on any medication? No, he said quickly. She's never done anything like this before. Please, just send someone. I don't know what to do. I dispatched 2 officers to the address while keeping Greg on the line. Can you see her right now? I asked. Yeah, he said. She's sitting in the living room. She's holding the phone to her ear, but the line is dead. I checked. And she's just repeating, he's coming? Yes, he whispered. Over and over. It's like she doesn't even see me. I tried shaking her, yelling her name, but nothing works. I could hear the panic rising in his voice, and I knew I needed to keep him calm. Greg, the officers are on their way. Just stay with her and make sure she doesn't hurt herself, okay? Okay, he said, though he didn't sound convinced. The line went silent for a moment, and then I heard him gasp. She just dropped the phone, he said. But she's still saying it. Saying what? He's coming. He's coming. He's coming. I stayed on the line until the officers arrived. When they knocked on the door, Greg let out a sigh of relief. They're here, he said. Thank God. I hung up, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in my chest. Calls like that don't just end when you put the phone down. They linger, gnawing at the edges of your mind. About 20 minutes later, one of the officers, Karen Lopez, called in to update me. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it I didn't like. Dispatch, this is Officer Lopez. We're at the scene. The woman is unresponsive but breathing. She's collapsed on the living room floor, still holding the phone. Is she injured? I asked. No visible injuries, Lopez replied. But here's the thing, the phone line is disconnected. Completely dead. It's not even plugged into the wall. My blood ran cold. What about Greg? He's shaken up but fine. Says she'd been like this for hours. We're calling for an ambulance. Keep me updated, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. For the rest of my shift, I couldn't stop thinking about that call. Who was she talking to? And what did she mean by, he's coming? Was it a psychotic break? Sleepwalking? Something else entirely? The next morning, I called the hospital to check on her. The nurse told me she was in a coma, and the doctors couldn't figure out why. There was no sign of trauma, no underlying health issues. She just shut down. Over the next few weeks, I couldn't stop obsessing over the case. I dug through records, trying to find anything that might explain what happened. That's when I found something that made my stomach drop. In 1978, a woman named Eleanor Harper lived at 287 Maple Street. She was found dead in her living room, clutching a phone receiver. According to the coroner's report, her cause of death was a heart attack, but neighbors reported hearing her scream, "He's coming!" moments before she died. I don't believe in ghosts. I've always been a rational person. But there's something about that house, about that phone call, that I can't explain. Even now, years later, I still wake up in the middle of the night, hearing her voice in my head. "He's coming!" Whoever he is, I hope I never find out. It was a quiet Tuesday night, the kind where the monotony of the dispatch office seeped into my bones. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, and the only sounds were the occasional crackle of static from the police radio and the tapping of my fingers against the keyboard. Nights like this were my least favorite. The stillness often felt like a prelude to something awful. The phone rang at 2:13 a.m., sharp and shrill, cutting through the silence. I picked it up immediately, routine taking over. 911 dispatch, what's your emergency? The voice on the other end was trembling, barely above a whisper. There's a woman screaming. I think she's hurt. Please, you have to help her. Adrenaline spiked through me. Sir, can you tell me your location? He stammered, his words uneven, as if he was choking on fear. It's an alley. Downtown, near 6th and Main. She's screaming. Oh God, it's horrible. I typed furiously, relaying the information to the nearest patrol unit. Stay on the line with me, sir. Help is on the way. Can you see her? No, he croaked. It's dark. But I can hear her. She's in so much pain. You have to hurry. The desperation in his voice made my stomach churn. I pressed the button to alert the officers again, urging them to move faster. My headset crackled as they acknowledged the call. Sir, can you tell me your name? I asked, trying to keep him talking. He hesitated. Michael. My name is Michael. Okay, Michael. Are you in a safe location? Before he could answer, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the line. It was unlike anything I'd ever heard, raw, guttural, and filled with pure agony. My blood ran cold. Michael, are you still there? I asked, my voice shaking despite my training. Yes, he whispered. Oh God. She's screaming again. His voice broke, and I could hear him sobbing softly. The patrol officers arrived at the scene minutes later. I heard their voices over the radio as they reported their findings. Dispatch, this is Unit 5. We're at the location. No visual on the woman. Stand by. I relayed the message to Michael. Michael, the officers are there. Can you see them? He didn't respond. Michael? There's blood, he said suddenly. In the alley? There's so much blood. But she's still screaming. I can hear her. I patched back into the radio. Unit 5, the caller says there's blood in the alley. Confirm? Dispatch, we've got a puddle of blood here, one of the officers confirmed. But no sign of a victim. Continuing to search. I felt a knot tighten in my chest. Something was very wrong. Michael, are you certain the screams are coming from the alley? Yes, he said, his voice barely audible. She's so close. I can. The lines suddenly went silent. No static, no background noise, just dead air. Michael? Michael, are you there? I shouted, my pulse racing. Nothing. I gripped the edge of the desk, my knuckles white. Unit 5, the caller's line just went dead. Be advised. The officers acknowledged, but their search turned up nothing. No woman, no caller, just a puddle of blood soaking into the cracks of the asphalt. They scoured the area for hours, but it was as if both the victim and the caller had vanished into thin air. When my shift ended, I couldn't shake the unease that clung to me. The woman's screams replayed in my mind, haunting and relentless. I barely slept that morning, my dreams plagued by shadowy alleys and disembodied cries. The next day, the news broke. A woman's body had been discovered in a dumpster just 2 blocks from the alley. She'd been mutilated beyond recognition, her blood painting the walls of the metal container. The coroner's report detailed the horror, deep lacerations, signs of prolonged torture, and a look of sheer terror frozen on her face. I stared at the report, bow rising in my throat. I couldn't help but wonder if the screams I'd heard were her final moments. And Michael, who was he? Why hadn't he stayed to meet the officers? Had he been a witness? Or something more sinister? The case remained unsolved, the details etched into my memory like scars. To this day, I can still hear her screams when the nights grow quiet. And I still wonder if the next call I take will bring the same haunting silence. The crisp air of Halloween night drifted in through the office window, bringing with it a sense of unease that was all too familiar to me. As a 911 dispatcher, Halloween was always an intense time. People were out in the streets, trick-or-treating, and for some, it meant more than just costumes and candy. It brought out the worst in human nature. That night, the city was busy with calls, the usual chaos of sirens and frantic voices blending into a distant hum. But none of that could prepare me for the call that would change everything. It started like any other call. 911, what's your emergency? The voice on the other end was calm, almost unnervingly so. It was a man's voice, but it was muffled, as if he were trying to whisper without being heard. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled as I strained to hear him over the background noise. I'm seeing someone on the roof of a house, the voice said, barely audible. They're just standing there, staring at me. I frowned. This was unusual. Most people reporting suspicious activity on rooftops were either mistaken or exaggerating. Halloween made everyone a little paranoid. But the man sounded genuine, his voice thick with concern. Can you give me the address? I asked, my fingers poised over the keyboard, ready to log the details. He hesitated for a moment before speaking. It's. I froze. The address he had given me was my own. A cold surge of panic washed over me, creeping from the base of my spine up to my chest. I felt my breath catch in my throat as I struggled to process what I had just heard. My mind raced, trying to rationalize it, but I couldn't. My fingers trembled on the keyboard as I quickly glanced at the caller's information. The location matched. This was my home. Sir, I said, my voice trembling despite my best effort to sound calm. Can you confirm that you're seeing someone on my roof? Yeah, I am. Just standing there. Not moving. The words echoed in my mind, but they were no longer just words. They were a reality I couldn't ignore. I had been a dispatcher for years, but never had I encountered something so personal, so deeply unsettling. I took a breath and tried to steady myself. Stay on the line with me, I said, though I wasn't sure why. The man's voice was too calm for me to believe he was truly in distress. I need to get someone to check it out. Before I could dispatch officers to my location, I quickly pressed the button to call my wife. My heart raced as the phone rang, each second stretching out, my mind already racing through the worst possibilities. The call connected. Hello? It was her voice. I felt a slight wave of relief, but it was fleeting. Babe, are you and the kids okay? My voice was strained, betraying my anxiety. I could hear the static of the phone, and in that moment, it felt as though the air itself had thickened. We're fine, she said, sounding confused. What's going on? Is everything all right? I just got a call, I said, trying to explain. Someone's saying they see someone on our roof. Are you sure everything's okay? A brief silence followed. Then, her voice softened, a little more concerned. I'm looking out the window now, and no one's out there. Everything's fine, I promise. I exhaled, my chest loosening just a little. But even as she reassured me, a knot tightened in my stomach. I had to ignore it. I had to believe her. It was Halloween, after all. People played pranks, and sometimes, paranoia set in. All right, I'll be home soon. Stay inside, just in case, okay? Of course. I love you. I love you too. I hung up and quickly refocused on the call. The man was still on the line, waiting for my response. Sir, I said, trying to maintain control of the situation. I'm dispatching officers to your location. Stay where you are and stay safe. But before I could finish, he cut me off with something that sent an icy chill through me. You don't get it, do you? They're still there. They're on your roof right now. I can see them, just standing. Watching. My heart skipped a beat. A jolt of cold dread shot through me. Something was wrong. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. This wasn't just some prank. This wasn't just Halloween madness. The terror in his voice, no, the cold certainty, spoke to something deep inside me. The feeling wasn't right. Sir, stay on the line, I ordered, my mind racing, trying to process what was happening. I'm dispatching someone immediately. But the line was already dead. My pulse thudded in my ears as I scrambled to call my wife again. The phone rang. It felt like an eternity before she picked up. Hello? Her voice sounded different now, worried. Is everything okay? I asked, trying to keep my tone steady, even though my gut was twisting with an overwhelming sense of dread. Yeah, everything's fine, she replied, though there was hesitation in her voice. I'm just watching TV with the kids. What's going on? I need you to check the roof, I said, a wave of panic rising in my chest. Please just check. Make sure everything is all right. I already told you But before she could finish, the sound of something heavy scraping against metal interrupted her. I froze, my blood running cold. Did you hear that? She whispered, her voice barely audible. The sound of heavy dragging echoed through the phone line, growing louder and louder as if something, or someone, was moving across the roof. No. No, don't go outside, I shouted, my heart racing. Stay inside, and lock all the doors. Now! I hung up without waiting for a response, my mind spinning. I was so close to losing control. I called for backup, my fingers pressing frantically at the keys to dispatch officers to my address. But it was too late. Before I could hit send, the phone rang again. The same number. It was the man again. I hesitated for only a second before answering, my breath shallow and ragged. What is it? What's happening? The man's voice was no longer calm. It was distorted, full of fear. They're on the roof. They're looking at me. And now they're looking at you. They know who you are. A deep, guttural scream echoed through the phone. The sound sent chills through my entire body. Then silence. The line went dead once again. I was paralyzed. My fingers shook violently as I tried to call my wife back, but the call wouldn't connect. The line was dead. I couldn't reach her. I couldn't get through. Panic swept over me like a wave, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely and utterly helpless. I pounded on the keyboard, desperate for any sign of life from the other end, but there was nothing. I grabbed my keys and bolted from the dispatch center, racing toward my car. Every second felt like an eternity. My mind screamed at me to get home, to get to my family. But as I drove, I couldn't shake the image of the man's voice, the chilling certainty in his words. I reached my street, my headlights cutting through the fog. I saw the flicker of lights from my house in the distance. Everything looked normal. My wife's car was parked outside. The front door was closed. But then I saw it. A figure on the roof. The figure was standing perfectly still, staring down at me. I felt a jolt of recognition. It was no one I knew, yet somehow, it felt like the figure knew me. And then, the figure turned, slowly, deliberately, and vanished into the shadows of the night. I didn't wait to see more. I bolted out of the car and ran toward the house, shouting my family's names. The door opened before I could reach it, and my wife stood there, wide-eyed. I don't know what just happened, she said, voice trembling. But something isn't right. I rushed inside, checking the kids' rooms, looking for any sign of danger, but there was nothing. The house was silent, too silent. I felt the air change, like it was thick with something dark. And then, the phone rang. It was the same number. I've been working as a 911 dispatcher for years, but this call, this single moment, will haunt me for the rest of my life. I've heard plenty of strange things over the phone, but nothing prepared me for the terror I was about to witness, even from a distance. It was around 2:15 a.m. when the phone rang. Most of the calls at this hour were the usual: a dog barking too loudly, a car accident in the rain, but this one was different. I could feel it the moment I picked up the phone. The woman's voice was shaking, and there was a sense of desperation in her words that cut through the air like a sharp knife. 911, what's your emergency? I asked, trying to sound calm even though the hairs on the back of my neck were already standing up. Please, please, you have to help us. We're trapped. The woman gasped, barely able to form the words. We're at the Blue Moon Motel, on the outskirts of the city. My husband and I, they won't let us leave. I leaned forward in my chair, my instincts kicking in. Trapped? What do you mean, trapped? Who's preventing you from leaving? The staff, they're acting so strange. The receptionist, the waiter, they won't let us leave the room. They keep telling us not to go outside. They keep saying, don't go outside. They aren't human. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I could hear her breath hitching on the other end of the line. Her voice was trembling, almost frantic. Something wasn't right. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Ma'am, listen to me. Lock the doors. Don't open the windows. Do you have your phone? Keep the line open with me. I'm sending a patrol car to your location right now. Can you tell me what's happening? There was a long pause before she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. I can hear them tapping on the door. And the windows. It's not normal. It's like they're trying to get in, but they're not human. They keep telling us not to go outside. I tried to calm myself. I couldn't let the fear creep in. This wasn't the time for panic. Stay inside, ma'am. Stay on the line with me. Help is on the way. Are you with your husband? Is he all right? Yes, he's here with me, she said. But the door, it keeps tapping. It's not right. I could feel the tension in her voice. What do you mean? Who's tapping on the door? I don't know. It sounds like fingers, nails dragging against the door, and the walls, too. We're not opening the door, but they're still out there. It's like they're waiting for us. I forced myself to speak slowly, trying to calm her down. Listen to me. I need you to stay calm. The police will be there any minute. Stay in the room, lock the door, and do not open it. Understand? There was a faint sound in the background. A noise. Almost like a low, guttural whisper. Then a thud. A soft thud against the door, followed by a muffled voice. It wasn't her. It wasn't her husband. Do you hear that? I whispered, my throat suddenly dry. Yes, oh God, yes. It's not normal. They're right outside. I don't know what to do. A knot tightened in my stomach. Stay calm. We're almost there. Do you hear anyone talking to you? Can you make out the voices? No, she said. It's not voices, not real voices. It's like something is trying to get inside. I'm so scared. Please, please hurry. I could hear the fear creeping into her words now, and my own pulse quickened. I stayed on the line with her, my mind racing, trying to figure out what could be happening at that motel. I'd never heard anything like this before. Minutes passed. The sound of tapping didn't stop. It grew louder, more insistent. I could feel my heart beating in my throat. There was something wrong with this call. It didn't feel real. It felt wrong. Stay with me, I urged, my voice shaking. Stay with me, we're sending help. Can you hear me? There was no answer. Only the tapping, and then silence. The seconds dragged by like hours. I could feel myself on edge, my nerves stretched thin as I waited for the police to reach the motel. I kept listening to the line, waiting for any sign of life on the other end. But it was like they'd vanished. The woman. Her husband. The sounds. Everything. Finally, the sound of sirens broke the silence, and I felt a small, uneasy relief. They were close. They were almost there. But then, something strange happened. I was just about to disconnect the call, to reassure her that help was on the way, when a voice came through. But it wasn't hers. It wasn't her husband. It wasn't even human. "Don't open the door," the voice whispered, low and distorted. "They aren't human." I froze. The line went dead. I immediately called the officers at the motel. They didn't answer. I tried again. Nothing. Minutes later, the police arrived at the Blue Moon Motel. The place looked run down, like it hadn't seen a guest in years. I could hear the officers speaking, their voices muffled over the radio. I held my breath. "We're at the Blue Moon," one of the officers said, his voice shaking. "There's something wrong. This place, it's not right." They searched the rooms, but they found nothing. No sign of the woman, no husband, no strange staff. The receptionist was still there, grinning unnaturally, his eyes wide and vacant. He said there had been no one checked into room 7, where the woman had claimed to be. The entire motel seemed empty. Hollow. I tried to contact the woman again, but the line was dead. A couple of hours later, after the police finished their search, I got a call from a colleague. The Blue Moon Motel didn't exist. There was no record of it in any of the databases. No address. No ownership. It was as if it had never been there at all. But I knew what I heard. And I'll never forget the voice on the other end of that call. It was an unusually quiet night at the dispatch center, the kind of eerie calm that makes your skin prickle with unease. I'd been working night shifts for years, and while the stillness should have been welcome, it always left me on edge. There's something about silence that amplifies every sound, every faint hum of a fluorescent light, every distant creak of a chair, until it feels like the building itself is alive, holding its breath. My shift started at 10 p.m., and by 2 a.m., I was struggling to keep my eyes open. The coffee in my thermos had gone cold, but I kept sipping it anyway, more out of habit than necessity. The call volume was low, just a few minor disturbances and one drunk driver reported by a concerned neighbor. Nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing to break the monotony. Then the phone rang. The sharp, shrill tone shattered the stillness, jolting me upright in my chair. I grabbed my headset and pressed the line open. 911, what's your emergency? At first, all I heard was heavy breathing. The kind that comes from someone who's either terrified or running for their life. Hello? Can you hear me? This is 911. What's your emergency? Finally, a voice broke through. A woman, panicked and barely coherent. Someone's knocking on my door, she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. They've been knocking for 5 minutes, and they won't stop. I could hear the fear in her voice, raw and unmistakable. Ma'am, what's your name? Jessica. Okay, Jessica, I need you to stay calm. Can you tell me where you are? She rattled off an address, a small house on the outskirts of town. I typed it into the system and flagged it for dispatch. Help is on the way, Jessica. Are your doors and windows locked? Yes, she said, her voice trembling. But he won't go away. He just keeps knocking. I strained to hear over the line, and there it was, a slow, deliberate knock. It wasn't frantic or aggressive. It was almost methodical, like whoever was out there had all the time in the world. Jessica, do you know this person? Have you seen them? No, she whispered. I looked through the peephole, but I couldn't see his face. He's standing too close to the door. The knock came again, louder this time. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Stay on the line with me, Jessica. Don't hang up. Officers are on their way. Okay, she whispered. Her breathing was shallow now, barely audible over the line. I could imagine her, crouched in a corner, phone clutched to her ear, every muscle in her body tense with fear. Then the knocking stopped. He's gone, she whispered. Her voice was so soft I almost didn't catch it. Are you sure? Can you still see the door? Yes. He's not there anymore. Relief flooded her voice, but it was short-lived. A moment later, she gasped, sharp and sudden. No. He's at the window now. I froze. Which window, Jessica? Where is he? The one in the living room. He's just standing there, staring in. Can you see his face? No, she said, her voice breaking. The blinds are closed, but I can see his shadow. He's right there. Stay where you are, I said firmly. Don't go near the window. Officers are only a few minutes away. The line went quiet, except for her breathing. I could hear her trying to stifle her sobs, trying to stay quiet. And then, without warning, the line went dead. Jessica? I said, my voice rising. Jessica, are you there? Nothing. I called back, but it went straight to voicemail. My stomach sank. I radioed the officers en route, urging them to hurry. The next few minutes felt like an eternity, the silence in the dispatch center now oppressive and suffocating. When the officers arrived, they found the front door wide open. The house was empty. No sign of Jessica. No sign of an intruder. Just an overturned chair in the living room and a phone lying on the floor, its screen cracked. I stayed on the line with the officers as they searched the property. They checked every room, every closet, even the crawl space. Nothing. It was like she'd vanished into thin air. In the days that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about that call. I replayed it in my head over and over, trying to make sense of it. Who was the man at her door? Why didn't he say anything? And where had Jessica gone? The police launched an investigation, but leads were scarce. The neighbors hadn't seen or heard anything unusual that night. There were no signs of forced entry, no footprints outside the window. It was as if the entire incident had been erased, leaving nothing but questions and an overwhelming sense of unease. I've taken countless calls during my time as a dispatcher. Some stick with you more than others. But this one haunts me. Late at night, when the world is quiet and the shadows seem to stretch a little longer, I hear that knock. Slow, deliberate, unrelenting. And I wonder, what would have happened if Jessica hadn't called? If she'd opened that door instead? I'll never know. And maybe that's the most terrifying part of all.